Week one sucked. There were so many low scores everywhere. A bunch of these guys I thought were going to be good. Turns out they are booty cheeks. And I'm going to have to go through and I'm going to have to update rankings and I'm going to have to talk about every impact that we had from this week because obviously the offseason, I'm just guessing. But now we're actually seeing what's going down in fantasy football. Now, our first game I want to talk about would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. This was supposed to be a great game environment, right? We were supposed to get a ton of passing volume. Now, Baker Mayfield does give us 167 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Baker Mayfield has some sneaky rushing upside here as well. So 3.9 fantasy points just coming from what he was able to do on the ground. So realistically, going into the future, Baker Mayfield's still probably a quarterback you're starting every week, regardless of matchup. The only thing is he's still clearly not in the tier of Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels. Now, the running back room here was not the best rushing production-wise. Like Bucky Irving had 37 rushing yards. Rachaad White had 14. If we're going to look at the snaps, you had 44 snaps for Bucky Irving, 14 snaps from Rachaad White. This is entirely different than what we had even at the end of last season, where we're finally seeing Bucky Irving emerge as that true 3-down running back. And Bucky as a receiver gets you the receiving touchdown. Yes, you only have 8 receiving yards for a total of like 45 yards from Bucky Irving this game. But realistically, if you have Bucky Irving, I think you can be very, very confident that he's a running back one in fantasy going into the future in full PPR formats. Now, looking at the receivers, Egbuka is here. Every report that we had coming out of camp was talking about, Egbuka, he is the man's man. He is a professional. He can play any spot on the field as a wide receiver. And yeah, you see him come away with the 2 receiving touchdowns. The volume isn't there for him to be the wide receiver one. Like he has the same amount of targets as Sterling Shepard. Mike Evans is still the wide receiver one in this offense with 8 targets. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see the young rookie that was a round 1 NFL draft pick that's had all the positive buzz have more efficiency than Mike Evans, where Mike Evans was drafted back in 2014, so he's going into his 12th NFL season. So if I'm going into the future with this, I would view both Mike Evans and Egbuka as must-start wide receivers every single week, alongside Bucky Irving and Baker Mayfield. But moving over to what we have with the Atlanta Falcons side of things, we had the big play right at the beginning of the week from Bijan Robinson. I thought Bijan Robinson was going to be putting up 40 points when he had the 50-yard receiving touchdown. It does cool down just a bit. Like he actually ties with Tyler Algier for 24 rushing yards as the lead back on this team. But if you're looking at the snaps, Bijan played 63. Tyler Algier was at 19. And Bijan Robinson sees 7 targets. So Tyler Algier is nothing here. Don't worry about it. Bijan's still an auto lock, top 3 running back every single week. Set it and forget it. Going over and looking at the receivers, London had 15 targets. And London got injured in this game. Now, London looks like he's probably going to be okay. It's a day-to-day shoulder injury. Maybe he misses week 2, but I wouldn't expect him to be out for a prolonged period of time. So London looks like an auto lock, set it and forget it, wide receiver one every single week. Darnell Mooney's injury obviously had an impact here, but if you look at the snap rate that we had, all the snap data comes from PFF. You had Kyle Pitts actually getting a massive spike with his snaps, and I think that's because they had to rely on him with no Darnell Mooney in this game, but we should have Mooney going forward into the future. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals game was absolutely disgusting. The efficiency across the board was horrendous. You had 113 passing yards for 23 pass attempts from Joe Burrow. You had 46 total rushing yards from 23 total carries. So you're getting about 5 yards per pass attempt and about 2 yards per carry. It was horrendous. I started T. Higgins as my wide receiver one this week against Sal, and I straight up maybe losing the matchup because of it. Obviously, we'll keep you updated with the Flock League video that's going to be coming out Tuesday morning on what happens. Jamar Chase, nothing. Higgins, nothing. Chase Brown saves his day with the rushing touchdown. The reality of the situation is you still start Jamar Chase every week. You still start T. Higgins every week. Chase Brown's game today was better than you could have ever hoped for. He had all 21 of the carries for the Cincinnati Bengals. The only other running back that got involved was Samaje Perine, and really that was only as a receiver. So Chase Brown, if anything, it sounds crazy to say because he had a dud performance today, but I may be more excited about him going into the future based off this usage. And obviously, I'm still starting Chase, still starting Higgins. I would drop Taj Brooks because it does look like Samaje Perine's the running back too. So if you had Brooks as the handcuff, he's not the guy. Now, going over to Cleveland, Yeah, we can see why they needed to draft a couple running backs here to replace Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford gets you literally nothing, 8 rushing yards off of 6 carries. And if you started Ford, hell, the man had -3 receiving yards as well. Could not have been worse. I was so excited for Jerry Jeudy in this game. Like, I ranked Jeudy aggressively. I thought that Jerry Jeudy was set up to crush. The dude does okay. You have 66 receiving yards, but multiple drops. It was screaming at my TV seeing them. And this is off the back of 45 pass attempts from Joe Flacco and 290 passing yards. We're not going to get this type of passing volume every week in Cleveland. So this was like the setup for Jeudy to smash, and he didn't. So it is very concerning for me. Harold Fannin actually outproduces David Njoku. I thought David Njoku was going to smash this week as well. That was a horrendous call. Harold Fannin is getting quality usage. I can't look too much into the running back room here because obviously you had no Quinshon Judkins. Judkins just signed. They're already saying, hey, Judkins is probably going to play week 2. What I can say safely is if you have Jerome Ford, the dude's a bum, you drop him. Dylan Sampson, quality receiving back. Dylan Sampson gets you 8 receptions for 64 receiving yards and leads the team in rushing. I would assume that Quinshon Judkins is going to be the first and second down running back in this backfield. And Dylan Sampson's going to be more so the receiving back, almost kind of like Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins back at Ohio State. Now, going over to what we have with the Miami Dolphins, if you just logged onto Twitter today, you saw everybody clowning on them. I saw this funny meme that was the worst possible QB. 2 his arm strength, 2 his height, 2 his mobility, 2 his athleticism, 2 his accuracy, 2 his hand size, 2 his decision making. It was a disaster, right? From start to finish. You get to see some Zach Wilson in this game as well. Now, Achane is still like the feature back here relatively easily, right? There's not much to discuss. Devon Achane does have 34 snaps. And again, I don't really want to be looking at like garbage time with this. Achane saves his day. It could have been a hell of a lot worse if it wasn't for the receiving touchdown. The receivers here aren't startable. Like maybe I rank Tyreek Hill as a high-end wide receiver 3 this week. Jalen Waddle, there's no way he comes close to it. The projections here for the Miami Dolphins were really high because you go through and you historically see, hell, to start the year, this is a team that when they're fully healthy, they have been able to click. But to see this complete and utter collapse, it's reminiscent of what we had last year when Tua managed to come back and the Dolphins still could not manage to do anything outside of Jonnu Smith big plays. So the receivers may not be startable. Achane, you start him and set up a prayer that his talent can shine through the bad offense, but you're not going to be that hopeful for it. I did see some speculation that this is a situation where if it gets ugly, Tyreek could get dealt. Like Tyreek, I saw a little jersey edit of him as a Kansas City Chief earlier, and it looked pretty good on him. I mean, at least those colors. Now, going over to the other team, we have the Indianapolis Colts. We know the Miami Dolphins have an absolute garbage defense, right? So the Colts options were very appealing in this game. We talked about Daniel Jones potentially being a streaming quarterback. And Daniel Jones, phenomenal day. If you had him in best ball, if you had him in a super flex league, obviously you're very happy. Now going over and looking at what we had with Jonathan Taylor. The snaps with Jonathan Taylor at the end of the game aren't going to be 100% accurate. If you just look at when this game was for real in the first half, Jonathan Taylor was playing 100% of the snaps. He did not come off the field a single time. We combine that with the fact that Jonathan Taylor had himself a phenomenal performance still with over 100 total yards and logging 3 receptions out of the backfield. Then you combine that with the fact it could have been even bigger if Daniel Jones did not have 2 touchdowns that he stole from Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's moving up my rankings in a dramatic way based off this performance, based off this usage. Don't look at DJ Giddens getting 12 carries for 41 rushing yards and thinking he's going to take anything from Taylor this year. That would just be box score scouting you wouldn't have seen the beginning of the game if you would think that. I will say DJ Giddens, nice handcuff running back if you want to grab him. Going over and looking at the pass catchers, Michael Pittman Jr., F it. I'm ranking him over Josh Downs. Michael Pittman Jr. is inside my top 5 most drafted wide receivers on Underdog. Absolutely love to see the performance. In your regular redraft league, I'm probably not going to rank him anything better than like a wide receiver 3. But keep in mind, the reason I love drafting him this offseason is because he was playing with a broken back last year. Now you have the improved quarterback play with Daniel Jones. Tyler Warren got drafted ahead of TJ Hawkinson in the Flock League, and I saw that, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get a great value on Hawkinson. I get him after Tyler Warren. This is just Nathan being Nathan, and I'm going to be able to take advantage. I'm actually probably going to now have to move up Tyler Warren ahead of TJ Hawkinson in my tight end rankings. It looks like he could be this year's Brock Bowers. Leads the team with 9 targets, getting involved immediately right out the gate. And he does get some usage in the slot as well. Now, going over to the Carolina Panthers, I thought that T-Mac, whatever you wanted to call him, was set up to crush. The over-under of this game, the implied team total for Carolina, sportsbooks were telling us that, you know what we saw at the end of last year from Bryce Young may be real. Maybe Bryce Young isn't the worst quarterback in the NFL, which he was for the first 20 starts of his NFL career. Maybe the last 3 games that he played where he looked decent, those were legit. They weren't. Apparently, Bryce Young is the guy that he's been for 90% of his NFL career, and Bryce Young is arguably in the running with Tua to be the worst quarterback in the NFL. Tet should have smashed. He had 9 targets. He had 68 receiving yards. He had almost 50% of the receiving production here for the Carolina Panthers, which is reminiscent of what he had in college. For you to do that at the NFL level, we'll talk about Jackson Smith and Jigba in just 1 second, is ridiculous. So Tet, I'm probably still starting in good matchups going forward, just lowering expectations with how bad Bryce Young is. Chuba Hubbard still sees like a 3-down workload, saves his day with the receiving touchdown. I'm still starting Chuba Hubbard going forward because Hubbard just has the workload, even if it's a garbage offense. You probably just got to lower him down rankings a bit. Going over to Jacksonville, this is what I don't get. New coaching staff, right? Travis Hunter coming in, Byshell Tuden coming in. We get a lot of smoke coming out of this Jags camp about who the real starting running back is. Now, I traded for Travis Etienne in the Flock League, which I got really worried about. To be honest with you, I traded for Travis Etienne with the hopes that he was going to get dealt to like Dallas. But now it looks like Travis Etienne is the starting running back in this backfield. Travis Etienne, 143 rushing yards on my bench. I will say that. And also, you get 3 receptions and 13 receiving yards out of the backfield as well. So Etienne almost drops 20 fantasy points. Looking at the underlying usage, Travis Etienne played 40 snaps. Tank Bigsby was only at 14. Byshell Tuden, I forgot that he was even on the team. So Travis Etienne, the clear starter. I always preferred him over Bigsby because Etienne had the receiving capability where Tank Bigsby just simply doesn't have any. So going into the future, I'm probably starting Travis Etienne myself in my fantasy league. Definitely over the freaking bums that I started at wide receiver in my flex spots. Now, looking at the receivers, I want to say like, oh my gosh, did Travis Hunter, Brian Thomas Jr. not play? Because you go to the top of the box score, and it's like, oh, Britton Strange, the leading receiver. Oh, Dimey Brown, the second best option for this team. To go 3 and 4 rounds down to see Travis Hunter had 33 receiving yards. From what I saw watching this game, is they looked like they were just kind of getting a manufactured stuff, like, oh, quick little slant, quick little screen. Like, it looked like they were doing anything they could to put the ball in his hands, but he just wasn't really able to do anything with it. And then Brian Thomas Jr. had 7 targets. He was out there, like 57 snaps out of 63. He ran all 33 routes that he possibly could have. And the dude had 1 reception for 11 receiving yards. After being a true wide receiver 1 in fantasy as a rookie with Mac Jones under center. So going into the future, you have to start Brian Thomas still. Like, I understand it's horrendous, but this is fantasy football. The usage was still there. I still want to say that he's a great talent. Should we have taken him at the 1-2 turn in fantasy drafts? Probably not. I don't even want to go that far ahead of it. Travis Hunter runs 27 out of a potential 33 routes for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the wide receiver usage is great, but the offense doesn't look that good. And at the same time, with Travis Hunter, we don't know if he's going to get more defensive usage going into the future. Now, going over to the Raiders, of course, I had to freaking play Jacoby Myers this week. Out of all weeks, of all players, Geno Smith had 362 passing yards, as well as a passing touchdown. We get 103 passing yards going to Brock Bowers. 97 receiving yards for Jacoby Myers. You get a little Trey Tucker, a little Deontay Thornton, a little Michael Mayer, a little Jack Bech at the very beginning of the game. I saw that and I was like, ooh, is Jack Bech actually something? Apparently not. But Jacoby Myers ran 37 out of 40 potential routes. So confusing for me. Obviously, we raised Jacoby Myers in our rankings as we got closer to Sunday because Amari Cooper retired and then Christian Gonzalez was out this game. So obviously that's going to benefit Myers. But what the hell was all the smoke this offseason for? Why did they draft Jack Bech, draft Deontay Thornton, sign Amari Cooper, bring in a new quarterback, bring in a new coaching staff, have Jacoby Myers request a trade just for him to go up against me week 1 in fantasy and drop almost 18 points on my head. Brock Bowers, elite level talent, gets banged up in the game, so the snap data is not 100% accurate. I will say, though, Brock Bowers was still trending towards playing way fewer snaps this year than he did last year, where Michael Mayer is getting a lot of usage in 11 personnel. But Bowers' injury doesn't look serious. Brock Bowers, maybe my tight end 2 behind Trey McBride, but still definitely an elite option. And then looking at Ashton Jeanty, we were talking about Jeanty being a bell cow right out the gate. And yes, Ashton Jeanty is a bell cow right out the gate with only 38 rushing yards, but he does see pretty much every single snap. And it is disappointing, to say the least, for him to have 2 receiving yards in a game in which you had 362 passing yards from this Raiders offense. Now, going over looking at the Patriots, Drake May, 287 passing yards and a passing touchdown. I see that and I go, oh, thank God. Thank God I decided to start Stephon Diggs this week. Go over to box score and go, oh, Kayshon Boutte, this kid from LSU that we thought was just absolutely nothing. 103 receivers. That's the wide receiver 1 in New England. Absolutely sucks. Kicking the nuts. Stephon Diggs came through for us at like the very end of the game. I was making clips for the Flock League saying, hey, I'm benching you for the rest of the season if you don't do something. I mean, at least he got some target volume. At least he racked up some stuff in a full PPR format. But the reality of the situation, if he is not the unquestioned wide receiver 1, I think that we need to be concerned, because I don't know if we can bank for 46 Drake May pass attempts every single week. This team kind of completely abandoned the run, right? You had 14 non-Drake May carries to 46 Drake May pass attempts. So that's 14 rushes in comparison to 50 passing plays, and Stephon Diggs still did nothing in this game. Trevion Henderson, of course, this is the risk you always take when you're starting a rookie. This is why whenever we're looking at any rookie this week, not named Hampton, Tet, or Jeanty, I was a little hesitant to tell you to put them in your starting lineup. He definitely looks to be the best running back, definitely the most efficient RB on this team, and he saves you in a PPR aspect of it because he has 6 receptions, but he does only play a total of 20 snaps here in comparison to Ramondre Stevenson at like 43. And then Hunter Henry looks like an extremely viable tight end play going into the future. If you needed a tight end, Hunter Henry's on the waiver wire. I'd go ahead and pick him up. Now, looking at the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray is sick going into the game, so maybe you're a little bit concerned, blah, blah, blah. You have 71 receiving yards and the receiving touchdown from Marv, right? Marv is completely okay, even though Kyler Murray, you didn't get a lot of passing volume. You only had 163 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns. So is it extremely encouraging to see that you have Marv at 71 receiving yards, Trey McBride at 61 receiving yards, and then if we're looking at the next best receiver in this offense, it's somebody I'd never heard of before, and he had 10. So everything this season's going to get funneled between Marv and McBride, and it looks like Marv is probably an every week starter for you going into the future. Kyler Murray did give you some rushing upside as well. He got 38 rushing yards from Kyler. And y'all know one of the biggest stances I took in underdog drafts this year. Didn't do it in the Flock League. I didn't take either guy, but I went heavy on Trey Benson over James Conner, saying, you know what? I think it's going to be a committee backfield, and Trey Benson is that elite premium handcuff, or if anything were to occur to Conner, Benson could turn into a league winner. And I think based off what just happened in this game, looks like that's probably the case. James Conner kind of saves you with the receiving touchdown, but Trey Benson is 100% going to eat into his workload. And for my own selfish reasons, I'm a little bit excited about that. Now, James Conner definitely played way more snaps, but the efficiency with Trey Benson with the explosive play, I'm thinking we see more Benson in the future. Now, going over to the New Orleans Saints side of things, funny to get 46 pass attempts from Spencer Rattler. Now, Kamara does Kamara things where you get the rushing touchdown, so it saves his day, but realistically, to have 46 pass attempts from Spencer Rattler and only 2 Alvin Kamara targets, that is a concern to say the least. It looks like no running back 2 is worth rostering in New Orleans, where you have a little bit of Miller and a little bit of Neal both being involved. So I don't know if I'd roster any of the running backs outside of Kamara. Going over to the receivers, Olave got banged up, got taken out of the game for the bit, but it does look like Olave is just going to dominate in targets. And if you get 40 plus pass attempts from Spencer Rattler, Olave may be a horrendous pick in like non-PPR and half PPR formats because the touchdown upside won't be there in this offense. But in full PPR leagues, hell, I had to go up against Olave this week, and I was just looking, yep, that's another reception. That's another reception. That's another reception. And then Juwan Johnson, 11 targets, plays a ton of snaps. Juwan Johnson looks like he is a very viable waiver wire pickup in deeper leagues if you need help at tight end. Now, nothing is better than starting DK Metcalf, seeing Aaron Rodgers have 4 passing touchdowns, and then learning that the passing touchdowns went to Jonnu Smith, Jalen Warren, Ben Skoranek, and Calvin Austin. Brutal. From what I saw with Metcalf as well, is it looks like they were trying to give him like some manufactured touches, like, oh, hit him with the screen. Hit him with the screen. Hopefully he has a big play from it. I'm not walking away from this game super excited about Metcalf. I'll tell you that. Like, Metcalf's probably going to remain like a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 in my rankings. No other wide receiver is worth rostering in Pittsburgh. Aaron Rodgers, yes, he had 4 passing touchdowns. Mobility-wise, he looked very limited whenever I watched this game. Obviously, you can have your own take on that. The backfield split, we thought Jalen Warren was going to have a ton, but no, it was actually very much split between Jalen Warren and not Caleb Johnson, but Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell. And this is the massive concern for Caleb Johnson, right? Because I'm sitting here going like, yeah, we know Caleb Johnson's not going to be the starter at the beginning of the season, but maybe as time goes on, you have Caleb Johnson coming through and Caleb Johnson turning into the starter by the end of the year and just splitting with Jalen Warren at the beginning. But if Kenneth Gainwell's here and like Caleb Johnson legitimately needs to jump 2 different players in the depth chart, I'm not saying to drop Caleb Johnson, but it's going to be a long, long process. And then Jalen Warren's not nearly as interesting to start next week as he was this week. Now, what's hilarious with this game, right, is this game had the lowest over-under of any game in the NFL this week. I was constantly saying in videos, yeah, it's supposed to be the lowest scoring game of the week. It's supposed to be the lowest scoring game of the week, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, we go over to New York, just like what we saw in Pittsburgh, had a ton of points scored. Justin Fields, the rushing upside is immense. This is why Justin Fields is in consideration to be a fantasy football starter every single week and has been through his entire NFL career if he's the starting quarterback for his team at that point. And that will still be the case going into the future. Justin Fields had 48 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, giving you an elite performance. Justin Fields as a passer has one of his most efficient days ever as well. You go through and you add only 22 pass attempts, and we get 218 passing yards, a passing touchdown, no interceptions. Justin Fields, career level performance for him. Super encouraging for this to happen with his first offense. Fields himself, very much a starter in good environments going into the future. With Garrett Wilson on the end of this, I was worried about Garrett Wilson in fantasy this year, just given the overall passing volume projections that you had for this New York Jets offense. I understand Garrett Wilson dominates today, and I need to give Garrett Wilson his flowers. 9 targets with only 22 pass attempts, phenomenal. 7 receptions with only 16 completions, phenomenal. 95 receiving yards with only 218 passing yards, phenomenal. That is across the board, almost 50% market share numbers for Garrett Wilson, where we knew they were going to be elite. I was saying like 33%, which is still at the very top of the NFL. For him to get close to 50%, insane. Is it Jackson Smith and Jigba level? No, but we'll talk about him in a second. Going into the future, I am a little bit concerned that we see some regression because, again, this is a career game for Justin Fields, super promising, and I'm more excited about this Jets offense than we were beforehand. But I don't know if we can expect that the Jets perform this way every single week going into the future. And this is still a very rush-heavy team where you have 182 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns in comparison to only 212 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown. So just the math of fantasy football here is going to make it where, for me, I am expecting that the receivers struggle just a bit. But obviously, Justin Fields himself could still crush, especially if he's a good real-life quarterback now all of a sudden, and he can run the ball. Fields could be a league winner. Now, looking at Breece Hall also could be a league winner. The concern was this is a running back by committee. We've been told that over and over and over again. And you turn on the TV, and every time Breece Hall touches the ball, he is just 10 times better than the next running back they have. Breece Hall in this game, over 100 rushing yards. Breece Hall also gets you the 38 receiving yards, the second leading receiving player on this squad. Braylon Allen does vulture the rushing touchdown, which is very frustrating, and Braylon Allen did get some short area usage. but it looks like that is way less of a concern than it previously was, and it looks like Breece Hall's in a very good spot. Now, going over to the Giants, Russell Wilson's horrendous. We are 1 week in, and they are already considering pivoting over to Jackson Dart. Obviously, we talked about in the video where we dive into what bad offenses mean for wide receivers in fantasy. This is not the best if we're going to be looking at somebody like Malik Nabers. With Malik Nabers, I don't think you can rank him anywhere close to being like a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy, because if you have an offense that's bad, you're just never going to have the touchdown upside. Now, Nabers has 12 targets, 33% team target share. He has 71 receiving yards with only 168 passing yards. Market share numbers are still insane, but the issue is the passing volume. Going over and looking at the running backs, we are seeing that you have Tyrone Tracy as the lead back clearly in this backfield. Cam Scadaboo is actually splitting with Devin Singletary, which is very frustrating for somebody like myself who currently has Cam Scadaboo on the bench, where I was hoping that he would only have to jump Tracy to potentially earn a starting job. We're now very similar to Caleb Johnson. It looks like he's actually going to have to beat out 2 running backs. But the only guy I'm starting here this next week with confidence is Malik Nabers. And again, obviously, we're lowering expectations with Nabers until hopefully Jackson Dart can come in and Jackson Dart can save this team. Now, going over to the Commanders, right out the gate when we had Jaden Daniels threading the needle for the Ertz touchdown, I looked at it and went, okay, crap. I just made the biggest mistake ever trading Jaden Daniels in some pieces for Josh Allen in some pieces. Jaden Daniels is going to be just as good as Allen this year. This dude's legit. Trails off a bit in the second half, of course, but Jaden Daniels did have phenomenal rushing production with 68 rushing yards. Daniels remains inside the top 4 quarterbacks in fantasy as the only true elite players at the position. Looking at the running back position, I benched Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt myself this week with the hope that he was going to go out there, perform well, and I could be excited about the future with him on my team, and that's exactly what happened. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, you get the 82 rushing yards, and you get the rushing touchdown as well. You get the big play. A lot of people are very excited on Twitter. Looks great. Realistically, am I going through and jamming him in my starting lineup this next week? Probably not. We go ahead and we look at the snap data. You still have Austin Eckler out there for significantly more snaps. Austin Eckler is still going to be the receiving back. I think what you'd probably need to see for me to get excited to start Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is Jeremy McNichols turned into almost nothing. Then going over and looking at the receivers, not only does Deebo Samuel have 14.7 points in comparison to Terry McLaurin with 4.7, but Deebo Samuel has 10 targets in comparison to Terry McLaurin at 4. Zach Ertz had more targets than Terry McLaurin this week. Maybe, just maybe, this is the holdout leading to Terry McLaurin starting slow. We had the reports coming into this game that Terry wasn't going to be playing on a snap count, that Terry was 100% feeling confident, good to go. And it's true, he wasn't on a snap count. He ran 33 out of 37 potential routes. He was a full-time player. But I don't know. Maybe Deebo Samuel's better than I gave him credit for. Maybe Terry McLaurin is worse than I gave him credit for. I would still very easily rather have Terry McLaurin over Deebo, and we're going to hope that it's just Terry starting slow due to the holdout, but it's concerning to say the least. Now, I've been on a roller coaster of emotions with Christian McCaffrey. Y'all know I'm going up against CMC in the Flock League. Sal drafted him right ahead of me, where I have Saquon Barkley instead. Once we got the practice reports coming out for McCaffrey, I was doing a little dancing song saying, oh yes, I'm going to win this week. Hell yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah. McCaffrey had 31 touches in this game. McCaffrey had 10 targets. He had 16 points just as a receiver. You take away the 22 carries that McCaffrey had, he would have been one of the top wide receivers in fantasy football this week. If McCaffrey is fully healthy here, CMC goes back to being a top 3 running back every week in fantasy without question. I know some people are going to see the Brian Robinson usage and maybe people will say like, oh, it's not the same McCaffrey. He's not going to have 100% of everything. And maybe that's true. Brian Robinson does get some carries in here. But to be honest with you, I don't give a damn if they mix in Brian Robinson for some random carries in between the 20-yard lines. If they're going to use McCaffrey 100% as the receiving back and McCaffrey is going to get 100% of everything at the goal line, those are the valuable touches. And for me, if I had McCaffrey, I would want them to give Brian Robinson the empty calorie touches, the carries between the 20s to keep McCaffrey healthy for the touches that actually matter. So I wouldn't be worried at all about the Brian Robinson workload if you had McCaffrey. Now going over to the receivers, we have Ricky Pearsall going over 100 receiving yards. And with Pearsall, it looks like he's going to be a must-start wide receiver next week. Do you know why? because George Kittle is injured. Juwan Jennings is injured. I do not have any updates with these players just yet. Obviously, I'm going to be putting out videos. I'm going to be live streaming every single day until Christmas. So just make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already, so you can go ahead and you can get those updates. But if I were ranking Pearsall with neither Jennings or Kittle, he's going to be a must-start play. Brock Purdy is going to be way less interesting for me, as I do honestly think that Kittle's probably the most important player in this offense, not named Purdy. Now, moving over to the Seahawks side of things, Cooper Kupp, it's over. Like, pack it in. For us to see Jackson Smith and Jigba have 124 receiving yards off of 150 Sam Darnold passing yards, when's the last time we've had something like this? Jackson Smith and Jigba looks to be a true alpha at this point. I am fine telling you, cut Cooper Kupp if you have him in a 10-team league. If you're in a 10-team league, there are going to be better options off waivers. I'll update my rest of season rankings on the site tonight so you can see exactly who you would cut Kupp for if you were interested. But Kupp is toast. JSN is a locked and loaded wide receiver one every single week, because if we get a game from Darnold where he has 250 passing yards and a passing touchdown, and JSN's going to lead the NFL with his target share this year, and similar to what Malik Neighbors did last season, JSN can be Malik Neighbors from last year. Then going over and looking at the running backs, if you have Kenneth Walker, pack it up. It's time to call it a season. We got the report early this morning saying that Zach Charbonnet was going to have a larger role than we would usually expect. And we have the backfield split with Charbonnet playing more snaps, with Charbonnet seeing more carries, and with Charbonnet seeing more fantasy points. Now, what's actually funny is if you looked at these college profiles, I would have assumed that like Charbonnet would have been the receiving back if they were going to make it a committee, and Kenneth Walker would have been the first and second down guy. It's kind of the opposite here. You actually instead have a couple targets going in the direction of Kenneth Walker, and Charbonnet had nothing as a receiver, which is very interesting. Now, moving over to our next team, this is going to be the Tennessee Titans. So obviously the Titans were not the most exciting team in the world because you have the brutal matchup having to play against arguably the best defense in the NFL with the Denver Broncos. And at the same time, this was the first ever game for Cam Ward. So you have to give Cam Ward the benefit of the doubt here. You cannot spaz on this. Looking at the usage, Tony Pollard, true 3-down bell cow. Calvin Ridley, the clear alpha wide receiver target with 8 targets in comparison to only 28 total Cam Ward pass attempts. So going into the future, Tony Pollard's going to be a very exciting start in the games with no Tajay Spears, and Calvin Ridley will be a much more exciting start than he was this week, which we obviously knew that because we obviously know the Denver Broncos have a relatively strong defense, if not an elite defense. So there's nothing else really to talk about here with Tennessee. Looking at Denver, you have Courtland Sutton, the clear alpha wide receiver target. He has 9 targets out of 40 total pass attempts. Looking at the backfield split, we have RJ Harvey with the big long rush, looking like the more efficient back. J.K. Dobbins does out-snap him, however, 40 snaps in comparison to RJ Harvey at 22. And at the same time, you are looking at Dobbins with multiple receptions out of the backfield, where RJ Harvey did log -1 receiving yards. So if I had to pick a running back between the two of these guys to start next week, it probably would be Dobbins, but I don't necessarily think either guy's an auto lock. And then in regards to Evan Ingram, gets a little bit banged up. If you are looking at the total snaps, he plays 26, but again, we can't take much from this game with Ingram. Now, going over to Detroit, I know y'all are always annoyed with me talking about sportsbook projections and blah, blah, blah. But sportsbooks gave a lower implied team total for the Detroit Lions this week than we had seen from the Lions the past 2 seasons. That comes out to be a real thing, where the Lions look very bad. You have a total of 39 pass attempts from Goff, and really nobody does anything with them. Like if you're in a full PPR format, Jahmyr Gibbs saves his day. Despite Jahmyr Gibbs only giving you a total of 50 yards, both receiving and rushing, somehow he still drops 15 fantasy points if you're in a full PPR league. Half PPR format like on Underdog, not nearly as exciting. Looking at the backfield split between him and David Montgomery, it is interesting to see that Montgomery still led this team with carries, but maybe you aren't really seeing the Lions win as many games as they did last year. So we get more of these Jahmyr Gibbs, just inflated target share numbers where the Lions are playing from behind. Not saying that's going to be every game, but maybe more than it was a season ago. Looking at what we have with the receivers, Sam Laporta, 9 targets, 79 receiving yards, continuing the trend of him getting much better at the end of last season. It looks like Sam Laporta is somebody you're starting every single week, regardless of the matchup. Amon-Ra St. Brown, we took him to have at least 11.85 fantasy points on Underdog. I put my biggest pick'em that I had at any point this year on it. And of course, because I am the literal worst, there's nobody worse than me at this, he doesn't get there. You get 4 receptions, 45 receiving yards, does nothing. Jamison Williams does nothing. Montgomery does nothing. This offense was a debacle. No Ben Johnson. Worst offensive line with Ragnow retiring. I am super interested to see what sportsbooks say with the implied team total for this offense next week, because there is an outside chance the Packers just have the best or the top 3 defense in the NFL, and you just really don't want to go up against the Packers. And then on the Packers side of things, I was going, what the hell is wrong with Jacobs? Why am I not getting any Josh Jacobs points? Because at this point, I did not see this entire game. I had to go pick up food. So I'm sitting here going, refreshing, going, what's going on with Jacobs? What's going on with Jacobs? Why isn't he playing? I have red zone going with the audio. I'm like, why aren't the points getting scored? Finally, at the end of the game, we get a rushing touchdown. Thank God. I would have lost my mind. Jaden Reed has a receiving touchdown. Jaden Reed, obviously, we didn't know if he was going to play this game or not. Only 188 passing yards for Jordan Love. You don't get a ton of Matthew Golden usage. So for me, nobody's startable in Green Bay as a receiver right now. They just simply have too many players out there drawing targets. It's too dispersed. The only guy that I'm starting is Josh Jacobs, and we'll do so with confidence. Now, going over to the Texans. CJ Stroud looked bad. This offensive line looked bad. I mean, they got better at the end of the game, but at the beginning of the game, they were just letting up sack after sack after sack. Nick Chubb does look like he is just the straight-up lead back. I mean, with Nick Chubb, 13 carries in comparison to Dare, I can't say his last name, at 2. You have Dameon Pierce with 3. You have Woody Marks at 3. Nick Chubb's not the guy who fumbled, so I'd expect Nick Chubb's role's pretty safe this next year. And then nobody in Houston cracks, or at least the only guy of relevance, the only guy that got started was Nico Collins. He has 25 receiving yards. You go through and go, oh, did Nico Collins get hurt? What happened? No, Nico Collins ran 30 out of 34 potential routes. Very similar to Brian Thomas. And what's funny is both these guys were going at the 1-2 turn. And both of them, I like drafting at the end of round 1, the beginning of round 2. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here going, I was smart enough to know this was going to happen. No. That's where fantasy drafters were taking them. Hell, that's where I was taking them as well. Super frustrating. Realistically, am I going to move him down my rankings? Yeah, a bit. Am I going to tell you that you can't start him this next week? No, for sure not. Going over and looking at the Rams, it will be a little deceiving if you're just looking at the snap data. Puka Nacua was in and out of this game with like concussion stuff. He got cleared. Puka's fine. Don't worry about it. And he's more than fine, to be honest. Is the dude only ran 22 routes and he had 130 receiving yards. Puka Nacua is making an argument to be not only considered as an elite fantasy option, but an elite real-life NFL wide receiver, and particularly inside the top 3. So my tier S of wide receivers, if you go over to flockfantasy.com right now, you will see that Puka Nacua is going to be up there with Chase, with Jefferson, with Lamb, clearly ahead of everybody that's going at the 1-2 turn. Devontae Adams, still somebody that you're probably starting every single week. Obviously, I didn't love Adams this year. 33-year-old receiver on his 3rd NFL team in 2 years. Not necessarily my exact style, but I understand why people were excited, and he's going to be okay as a wide receiver too. Kyron Williams, you are looking at a bell cow. Obviously, every offseason at this point, like clockwork, they tell us, oh yeah, running back X, Blake Corum is going to get more involved. Nope, did not happen. Kyron Williams, 49 snaps, comparison to Blake Corum at 10. Kyron Williams, locked and loaded, running back that you're starting every single week. That does not change whatsoever. But I really appreciate you. I really hope that you won week 1. What I'm going to need is I need a miracle game from Hawkinson and or DJ Moore to be a bum. All right. Now, I will say, if you were looking at the underdog pick'em, that I am going to be losing tomorrow night, because all I do is lose these. I'm going to be going Caleb to have higher than 219.5 passing yards, Rome to have higher than 49.5 receiving yards, and Justin Jefferson to have fewer than 79.5 receiving yards. I'm using the Profit Boost token that's available to me on Underdog at 40%, and that would be a $10 entry to win $66. So if you are trying to lose $10, you can tail me with the link in the description or comment section on Underdog Fantasy. Again, all I do is lose. I want to make that very clear. But if you use code FLOCK when you sign up, you're going to get $50 added in your account after you play your first 5. So links in the description, links in the comment section. I really appreciate you, and I really hope I can see you out with the live stream on Monday.